Put on the computer.
I will share my screen.
Okay, you should be able to do that now.
Well, thank you, Michael, for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be here. My name is Juliana, and I'm from São Paulo, Brazil. I am a graphic designer and a researcher in the fields of art, design, and digital media. I've been working with digital fabrication since I started my PhD in 2012. And through the following slides that I'm going to show to you all, I will tell a little bit about my journey integrating my research with the hands-on practice of digital manufacturing technologies. So this first, I will start showing this first project that is from 2012. It was in the first year of my PhD in visual arts at the University of São Paulo. I'm not sure if you heard of this university. And I was doing a course at the architecture department of the same university. I was in the fine arts, but I was all the time moving from the architecture to the visual arts. And it was there in 2012 where I had the opportunity to put into practice the subject of my studies that was about the creative use of digital fabrication as a tool in the visual arts. So the object was, this object was created entirely using Adobe Illustrator. And it was a moment of shift because by that time I didn't use any 3D software. So to be able to create this interconnected 3D shape, I depended entirely to my knowledge in geometry. So it all started with a tetrahedron. And from that I established a shape for the sides and the joints. For me was, because the important thing for me, I wanted to resemble a butterfly. This was an interesting project, my first attempt to use a laser cutter. I noticed that the material was fundamental once, in this case, if I have opted for a non-flexible material, I would not be able to connect the parts. So it was interesting to notice not only the use of the laser cutter, but also how this influenced in the result, the final result. So the lab that I had access in the architecture department at this university was the place where the first Fab Lab in Brazil was hosted. I'm not sure if you're also familiar with Fab Labs. Because it was a Fab Lab, it was part of the program to give access for people to explore the digital fabrication technologies that the lab had. One of them was the laser cutter that, as you can see by the image, I explored and also subverted, since I experiment using different materials in order to understand the machine limitations. And this is specific. This was an experiment where I myself, together with an artist and an architect, engraved the topography of an area of São Paulo, the city of São Paulo, in this chocolate bar. By that experiment, we learned to use the power and speed associated with the laser head. So there was some intentions while trying with different materials, not only like paper or plexiglass, but also food or organic elements. So to see what was going to happen. Well, this project I made together with a researcher from the Rio de Janeiro State University. The idea was to create a series of objects whose shape was a translation of the musical notations displayed at specific piano scores. There we worked with plexiglass of different color, juxtaposing layers of variations of metrics from the same music on a framed object. And we also milled in a halter machine, CNC machine, a shape that was supposed to serve as a basis for a mapped projection. The resulting objects were displayed in an art gallery in Rio de Janeiro. Well, this one, This project here was an important step for me in the 3D modeling and digital fabrication as a mean to materializing ideas. And by this time, I was more comfortable working with the digital fabrication machines and also the softwares. It was a wood panel measuring 50 to 50 centimeters, done together with two architects from University of São Paulo, using the space of the Fab Lab. So the idea was to translate the color information into different heights, adding a third dimension to the artworks of Vitor Vassarelli. In order to do that, we gathered the RGB color information from a grid of points across the original artwork, and through the definition of different parameters using Grasshopper in Rhino 3D, we were able to associate different heights that were subsequently united by a surface. So to be more accurate to display the variations of heights across the surface, we decided to mill juxtaposed colored MDF sheets. In this case, it's Valchromat. I'm not sure if you heard of it, but Valchromat MDF, they are colored in they are integral colored. So we could mill it and the color would be also there. So we were not gonna, it's not only the surface. To mill the wood, we used a CNC router machine. It took hours to finish the milling process, since the Halter CNC works milling one layer at a time. I'm not sure if you have the experience of using this machine, but it takes a very long time, since it was a 50 to 50 centimeters board. So the whole process was presented in 2013 at the AIC conference in Newcastle upon Tyne. In the conference of International Association of Colors conference. And during that time, when I first visited Newcastle, I got to know the University of Newcastle, where a year later I applied for a research internship during my PhD studies. So when I was there in Newcastle, I took a course of programming with processing. And my idea was to move from 2D graphics to 3D shapes using code. And you can imagine that that in 2012, I just knew how to work with vectorial vector softwares. So it was a learning step, because I started with vectors, then I went to 3D software modeling, and suddenly I was confronted with the idea to create 3D out of codes. So this was a really something that was difficult for me at first. So my idea was to do the experiments. So here are some of them. With generative shapes that would emerge out of codes that represented simple rules to create complex shapes. I started from zero, but managed to find a way that was visually very interesting to work in 2D and 3D. So I ended up in something that I could even open in Rhino, and it's very interesting to learn that I haven't done that. I just set the rules, set the parameters of the code, and each time I run the code, a different shape was created. So that was interesting for me, this generative way of creating. And although I think that for the experienced processing user, the process may look very simple, but for me it was great when I came up with a shape that was uniquely generated by the computer out of a set of simple rules. At that time, I didn't advance with that experiment, but some years later, I was able to revisit it under a new perspective. So it was in 2017 for the, sorry. It was 3 years later, yes. It was 3 years later from this experience from Newcastle. That together with a research group that I am a member since 2008 in the visual arts department at the University of São Paulo, that I created an artwork whose final shape was the assemble of various tetrahedrons according to parameters defined by the computer. So here you can see in the image. The assembling order of the tetrahedrons was organized by parameters that we defined. Each time we run the parameters, the assembling order would look different of those modules. That tangled shape that I created when doing the processing course was used to design the faces, the sides of this tetrahedron, and also served as a guiding line where the modules would be assembled. Here is the resulting sculpture was presented at the International Meeting of Art and Technology event that took place in Portugal in 2017. In 2017, I started a course in Fab Lab called Fab Academy. The persons who usually know Fab Lab, they know what a Fab Academy means. So it's a course that it's like 4 months, and we do a series of projects, like 19 projects in 4 months. So it's very time consuming. So in 2017, I started this course that belongs to Fab Foundation and was taught by Neil Gershenfeld, that is the director of the CBA in the MIT, Center for Bytes and Atoms. So the aim of this course is to provide hands-on learning experience regarding rapid prototyping by the planning and execution of weekly projects. It's intended mainly for those who aim to coordinate a digital fabrication lab, or to those who are interested to learn more about digital manufacturing and electronics technologies. So what you can see here in this slide was one of those experiments where the idea was to work with press fit joints enabled by the laser cutter. So this simple experiment helped me to understand a lot of limitations of the technique of laser cutting, and all the errors or insights from the results were documented in an online portfolio that you can access if you use this QR code here. So there are plenty of projects that I made during that time. So 1 year before I started this Fab Academy, I was invited to coordinate a Fab Lab in São Paulo, whose focus was on arts. The name of the Fab Lab was Porto Fab Lab, and we were a team of designers, artists, and architects doing experiments involving traditional techniques traditional techniques relating to visual arts and crafts, and digital media, exploring knowledge related to different graphic and visual procedures. In this slide, there is a project of cooperation between my lab, the Porto Fab Lab, and the Energy Museum of São Paulo, where we developed the material for accessibility for visually impaired visitors of the museum. So amongst the material was the museum plant with embossed tactile features that you can see here in the image also. And in order to accomplish it, we relied on the museum floor plan, and we designed the best solution to display it based on the laser cut technique to materialize the set. We also created a replica of a very old light pole whose wooden mold is displayed in the same museum, but forbidden to touch. So to do that, we 3D scanned the original. We edited this 3D model in order to fix the mapping gaps. We 3D printed it in parts that were assembled in the end. So it was a lot of hours to finish this that you're seeing here, more than a day printing. So it was very time consuming. We also created some boards with shapes from the building facade. For these objects, the laser cutter was used. We also painted the baseboard from which the shape emerged in order to give some contrast. just to show the features of the building for the people who can't visualize it. So we need to take those elements to touch. So another project conducted at this same lab, and at Porto Fab Lab, where I was a coordinator, was the production of shoe soles for this interactive installation by the artist Raquel Kogan. We made many tests in order to enable the shoes to imprint the words that were fixed in the soles into a marble dust container. We ended up using the laser cutter to cut the letters, but the materials were a lot. We changed, we tried a lot of materials, but we ended up with MDF. It was the one that didn't leave any traces and just imprinting the letters itself. And my work at the Fab Lab, at this Fab Lab that I told you, that I showed you, lasted for 4 years. That it was exactly the time that the cultural center in which the lab was situated existed, because it ended its activities after these 4 years. So it's sad, because it was a lab that was the only Fab Lab in Brazil that was dedicated to the work with arts. And after that, we didn't have any space to work on this area, to experiment in this area. But after that, by that time, I had collected some experience, and until today, I have been teaching in the graduation courses of design here in Brazil, now specifically at the European Design Institute. In this final slide, I show some of the activities whose focus was to explore the move from 2D to 3D. The students, they were mainly unfamiliar to 3D modeling, but following different creative methodologies and using digital fabrication technologies as a medium, they were able to materialize their ideas. So the focus was always, and with my students, or also in my career as a path, or as experimenting in the lab, or doing the courses, was always, the focus is always in the process, not in the final result. So I hope that with this very short presentation, I was able to show you, to share this process with you all, of this importance of the process during the creation and of shapes. And I was an example that you can know nothing of 3D, but if you learn step by step, and if you keep on progressing with your software skills, and don't being afraid of the machines, because they are there just to they are there to be used, they are there to be tested. So you end up discovering a lot of things. So thank you, everyone. I will leave here my email in case you need to get in touch. And thank you, Michael, again for the opportunity.
Juliana, thank you so much. I am here. I can't turn my camera back on. For some reason, I keep getting a failed to start video camera. I turned it off to save on bandwidth, because I'm stuck in the middle of nowhere, and now I can't turn it on. So I'm having a really good day. But Juliana, thank you so much. It's a really interesting journey. And I'm intrigued how you're now kind of building upon your experience. And one of the things we spoke about last week was the importance of analog 3D and kind of making things with your hands to understand the relationships of objects. And obviously your workshops that you've been doing with your students, that's the kind of starting point that you've introduced to them. So that's really, really encouraging to see. So again, just to kind of reinforce that. And you've got a very kind of programmatic approach to some of your work now, and obviously it was the code that started to influence how you set parameters and let the design do its own thing. What's the kind of potential for that, do you see, you know, this idea of generative and procedural design?
Well, I think the most important is that you can't describe what the result would be, and the intervention of the computer, the software, the shape is as something not premeditated. It's the best. I think it's the most important point for me as a designer, because through all my life, like when I was working in the design agents and working with other designers, we all the time we have like something, a name, something where we needed to drive in that direction. But I thought that now that rethinking all my path, I noticed that to do something on the creative path where I am not leading the way, but I am just seeing how things are developing throughout the way. This is much more, I give more space for creative results. I can see much more, the computer has the ability to think much faster than we. So it can give a lot of results in shorter time, and we together with this machine, so this man-machine way of work. Yes, this process is much more, for me, it's very, very interesting. So for the final results, so this, when I showed this works for my students, we all the time we were fixing, not in the final objects, they were all the time discovering new shapes. They were all the time like, oh, we did that. How interesting that after this setting of rules, in this case here, as you can see in the right side, in the top and to the right, to the left, sorry, the top left side of the screen, you can see that they first started doing some connection with some stripes, and they, like in the code, like programming and like defining, like this is A, this is B, this is C, and now we're gonna connect these points, and I will end up with a shape, and we are gonna decide if we're gonna use this shape or that, and we are gonna connect them, and let's see what's gonna happen. More or less what happens in algorithm in the computer. So you let the computer to do its way, but you give them simple rules. So
yeah,
this
absolutely.
is very interesting.
Let it do the heavy lifting for you.
Yeah.
So quick question from Tom, not quick question, a question from Tom. And obviously opening up to the floor. So if there's any other questions, do ping them in the chat. So what kind of coding languages are worth learning for generative design? You know, there's a lot that can handle them now. Actually, one of the things that we'll be doing next week, Tom, just to point out, in Unreal Engine, we'll be using Unreal Engine to do some generative stuff next week. But in terms of in your case and the work you were doing in Newcastle, what were you using at that point? And
well, I was using Java. Java is related to the processing software, right? But also, but I think that to somebody who is beginning to work with code, I recommend highly to use processing. And there is a page where you can, I will find it and I will send to you. But right now, I think I just can access it through my website, okay. But I will send it to you back. There is a page where you can see a lot of experiments from people around the world about this. It's interesting for you to feel in your data sheet that you're.
Yes. Yeah.
Oh, so you're gonna put it there.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
I think it's open processing. If I'm not mistaken.
I'll add it into
openprocessing.org. I'm not sure. So Java is the main language, and it's not very hard if you work with even Arduino or processing together. So this is what I recommend. That I'm gonna try to find here the site while we're talking.
Okay, thank you. And so Fab Lab is still going. Fab Lab are kind of an international organization that you can apply to and have a kind of research position or run a project through their facilities. Is that right?
The Fab Lab is nowadays, the idea started in 2000, in the beginning of the century. And the idea is that each country has a lot of Fab Labs. The idea is to have a space. It's a lab with the structure that combined with some machines, so digital fabrication machines, but it should have an open day, a day where the community can go into the lab and work and use the machines freely. So this is the idea of that. The labs that are meant or they are named Fab Lab, they should have a day that is free for use. I have visited a lot of Fab Labs in UK. I have visited one in Sunderland, and I have visited in Scotland also. And they are all open and inviting people to go in. They have courses introducing to technologies, and they, of course, they are not all the same if you compare all, but mainly they should have this day that is free, and they should have some way to teach people how to use the basics there.
Yeah.
So it's an interesting place to start.
And as a kind of as a community, you know, whenever I've spoken to you over
Yes.
the last few years, you're in another country, and I'm like,
yeah,
I'm in the
It has
Fab
a
Lab in
community.
Estonia. I'm like, oh, all right, that's cool.
Yeah.
What are you up to now? And
it's Estonia is also in my plan, always in my plans. Maybe in the future I may go there to live there, but it's a nice place. But they don't have a Fab Lab there. It's not all the countries, but in Finland they have. I also visit the Fab Lab in Finland. It's the Aalto Fab Lab from the Aalto University. And I will give here the link where you can find the information about the Fab Labs. Wait a moment.
Thank you so much. So yeah, thank you for the open processing link. I'll add that into the spreadsheet too. Thank you for adding in some references to open source 3D printing software and the stuff that you added into that. Really appreciate that. And we're all kind of contributing to that and sharing that. So I'll send you an update. Well, actually, you have the link. So dive in at any point.
Yeah, if I find, if I get to know more, I will also put it there.
Thank you so much.
I would like to share two more things. This Fab Academy link that may be of interest to you, and also the scopes that I put there in the spreadsheet. But I will put it here again because the scopes. Wait a moment. Scopes. DF, digital fabrication scopes. It's a platform. Yeah, I'm just searching here exactly.
No problem.
And this platform, if you go now there, it's a platform where you can learn with people that usually do projects in Fab Labs using the digital fabrication technologies. And you can have access to a lot of projects that were done, and you can give feedback, or you can upload your own process there and share this knowledge with the whole community of the Fab Labs. And it's also open to anyone. You don't need to be in the Fab Lab to upload or to use the projects that are the lessons. They give a lot of lessons. They have resources. They have a lot of things here that are worth taking a look.
Fantastic. And, you know, that kind of gets you well underway, doesn't it? To sort of see the pitfalls that other designer makers have run into, and just kind of gets you going very, very quickly. So thank you so much for those. Juliana, thanks so much for your time. Any questions from anyone else? Are we good? And we can let Juliana get back to Life in Sao Paulo. Thank you,
Yeah.
Juliana.
Thank you very much for that. That's really interesting.
Thank you. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thanks,
Thank
Juliana.
you.
I'll speak to you
Thank you,
soon.
Michael, again. We will speak soon. Bye-bye.
I am waving behind that logo.
Okay. Bye.
Right, cheers.
Bye-bye.
Excellent. Thanks so much. So, Stephen Cavalier. He's
Hello.
sun-kissed in Brighton, calling Brighton. Sorry.
Can you hear me?
Can hear you very well. Thank you. Yeah, just as an explainer, I tried to turn my camera off to save my bandwidth and I can't turn it on again. So apologies. So Stephen Cavalier, hello and welcome to Sheffield. We've got a small turnout, but I'm recording and this is going to be shared with the year group as well. So I think it'd be really interesting for everybody to kind of see what you've been up to and what you're up to generally. We have worked together in the past. I don't know if we've actually ever worked on a project together, us directly, or whether Dave worked with you.
Because you did some titles and graphics for.
Oh my God! Of course, the photo booth.
Which, I probably still owe you some money for or something.
Yeah, that was pure love. It was pure love.
Okay. Phew, I was hoping you'd say that.
Of course, your photo booth film. I've completely forgotten about that. And I tell you why I've forgotten about that, because I've lost, there's a drive somewhere with our showreel on that is in a format, probably Flash, that is redundant somewhere.
Oh,
Yeah.
no.
Have you got it? Have you still got it?
Yeah, it's on the interweb.
All right, cool. Well, I will badger you for a link later on.
Yeah, I think it's on my Vimeo thing.
Ooh, that'd be very nice to see. Anyway, welcome. So Stephen Cav, we'll keep things informal. It's Cav, and
Okay.
he is a director and scriptwriter, amongst many other things. One of the things that Cav has been involved in recently was the Unreal Fellowship, which again is obviously all nascent burgeoning technology, and after having a career in animation, starting to see what real time can bring into the mix and thinking how that can be adopted into his work. But let me not preempt what he's going to say, because it'd be interesting just to know about how you got into your kind of world.
Yeah.
Writing initially, I think it was.
Yeah. Sorry, I was just looking for your list of subjects. Well, when I was a teenager, I used to, even before that, you know, like I'm sure like all of you, draw lots of stuff, copy comics, and then I started, you know, sort of like writing. I started reading these old golden age science fiction short stories, I remember, and then I started trying to write my own ones, and through that I always loved the idea of animation, like bringing my drawings to life, and I was drawing little comics and stuff, and then I worked out a way how to do that with a Super 8 camera and cut out characters, you know, legs and arms, everything all cut out, and then move them frame by frame. And I have to say, my mum, because I was talking about this the other day with someone, that my mum was fantastic, because she would always feed me, like she would always encourage me, and she whenever I did some drawings, or this is when I was, you know, little, pre-teenage or early teenage, whenever I did some drawings or wrote a little story, she would always make the time to stop whatever she's doing, and she'd sit down and read it and think about it and comment on it, and she'd always say, you know, it was really good, even if she didn't think so. And I think that gave me a great sort of confidence, really, that you know, because I've talked to other people whose parents weren't as supportive, and they often lack a bit of confidence, and I think I've got this confidence from my mum, always saying that my stuff was good every time I showed her, you know. I don't know how relevant that is, but
were your parents creative? Were they in the creative?
well, they were. My mum, I think, was like frustrated creative person. She was really into theatre, and they were in an amateur dramatics group, both of them. But my mum was really good at directing the plays and interpreting the scripts into a play. And she loved doing that, and people said she was really good at doing that, and I think that's what she wanted to do. And she did have the chance when she was younger to do that, to go to college and do that, because she'd done a lot of it at her school. But she was persuaded to go into biology and become a teacher, because that's more safe, I suppose, you know, and stuff. Especially in those days, I think there wasn't as much opportunity for people, weren't as encouraged to go into creative industries as much, because they weren't as recognized as being something you could do, you know.
But how nice. She saw that in you and can kind of nurture that as well.
I think she did, yeah. I think she and so she was always totally supportive when I said I wanted to do things like that. And like when I went to school, careers officer, and I said I wanted to be a cartoonist, which is how I defined it at the time, what I wanted to do, because that involved, you know, like drawing and writing a story, and that was really what I wanted to do. And they said, oh no, you can't do that. No, there's nothing like that around here. No, you've got a brain in your head. If you really apply yourself and try really hard, you could go and work in a bank, and maybe one day you could, you know, aim to be bank manager. That's what they said to me. So thank God my mum said, no, just ignore them. Just, you know, you do that, mate. You go for it, you know. So that was good. But then on the strength of those things that I did when I was a teenager, those crazy little cutout films, when I went to college and I did photography and cinematography, and I was still, even though it wasn't part of the curriculum at all, I was still trying to do these little animations. I was still drawing my comics, and I used to draw these comics and photocopy them and fold them up into little A5 size things and take them to comic shops where they would sell them on the counter with other, like, they were like fanzines, really, you know, little homemade comics and magazines and stuff. And then I'd also take them to gigs and sell them outside gigs. And I really enjoyed doing that. And sometimes I put my address in the back, and sometimes I'd get letters from people like from all over the country, like saying, oh, I bought your comic somewhere or other, and it's really good, and, you know, can you send me some more, and things like that.
Very enterprising. You were
so
well
cool.
ahead of your time.
Well, I'm sure I wasn't the only one doing it, but in those days, of course, there's no internet or anything like that, so people just, it was like this DIY culture of you know, just make it yourself and see what happens. But then, because I'd done stuff like that, I through a friend of a friend, you know, they knew that I did all this stuff, and I'd moved to London. I was a postman at the time, but I was trying to find my way. And in fact, what I was doing is I'd written this big feature film script, and I was trying to sell that around all the studios in London, just knocking on the doors, really. And you know, and people didn't really want to make my film because it probably wasn't good enough, but they really liked the fact that I'd knocked on the door and showed them the film and showed them the script, and, you know, and they would recommend, they'd say, well, we haven't really, you know, I don't think we can do it. We haven't got any, you know, plans to do anything like that, but, you know, they'd help you, you know, because they just appreciate the fact that you're knocking on the door and asking, and you're keen and you're passionate, and you've got something that you've made, and you're showing it to them, and they're going, wow, okay, that's good, you know. And people will help you if you do that. I think that's a great lesson I learned there, and that's a really good thing to learn for well, I tell my own kids that, you know, like, it's not this, it's often, it's a bit like the Rolling Stones song, right? The Rolling Stones are a very old band from back in the day that you've probably never heard of, but and they had a song you can't always get what you want, but if you try, sometimes you can get what you need. That was the words of the chorus, right? And so it's like, when you go around knocking on doors and trying to do something and trying to, you've got an aim, of course, but sometimes you can't get that exact thing that you want. But what will happen is people will open other doors for you, and they'll go, well, I can't give you that, but how about this? Would you maybe be interested in this? Or I know this bloke who's looking for someone to do this. And suddenly other doors open just because you're knocking on that door, you know? And so I just always think it's worthwhile just approaching people and not being afraid to not get what you want, because
Oh. Is that me?
animation, I couldn't believe it. Like someone said, oh, they need some people at this animation studio, and it's that film there. Can you see that?
Yeah.
That right?
When the wind blows.
When the wind blows.
When the wind blows. Classic.
Yeah. And even now, right, when people ask me, they say, oh, you do animation, what have you done that I might have heard of, right? And I go right back to the first two things that I did were still the best things I ever did, which is quite sad, I suppose. But in the sense of like big famous films that everyone might have heard of, and I'm still really proud I worked on them. It was that, When the Wind Blows, which I still think was a fantastic film.
I had no idea you worked on that. It's awesome.
Yeah, that was my first ever job. And then Roger Rabbit was about 2 years after that. Yeah, that's how old I am. So those two things there, and that Roger Rabbit I got because I worked on that. And on that, they said, oh, we need people to clean the cells. It's completely unskilled entry-level job. And what it is, you know, in those days, all the drawings were on cell, and then they went to the camera one by one. A cell is a clear piece of acetate.
Mm-hmm.
Which is transparent, and then the drawing of the characters on that, and they put that over the background and on a registration peg, and then they do that over and over, you know, and that's frame by frame. Anyway, so my job was to clean the transparent area of the cell with lighter fluid and a rag to clean all the paint dots off it. And but just the fact that I got my foot in the door, and then you know, I would talk to, and the great thing was, like, you could walk around the studio and see all these amazing animators at work, and it just blew my mind. And I was like, oh my God, these people are geniuses. And I had this massive sense of like imposter syndrome, like, oh God, I shouldn't be here with these, what I considered then to be, you know, just, yeah, geniuses, like amazing, fantastic stars. And
that's quite overwhelming to sort of see it at that scale, that kind of industrious scale, as opposed to, you know, sort of indie independent mentality, which
right.
is much
and
more
then
prevalent.
and then of course what would happen was so I would go around and talk to them, but of course they were a bit busy and stuff, but anyway, they'd still talk to me a bit. But then everyone would go to the pub on a Friday night, and this is the other thing I recommend: always go to the pub on a Friday night, if that still exists where you're working. It should do. If it isn't, make it happen. I recommend pubs, because then that was when I really got to know these people. And then they would say, oh, well, yeah, come up and see me on Monday, and you know where my desk is, and like, maybe you know, I'll show you what I'm, you know, maybe you could help me with this and that and the other. And so then that's how I got taught by people, and I ended up kind of moving up the ladder a bit to being a cell painter, and then a cell tracer, and then an in-betweener, and then an assistant animator, and then an animator. And wow. I don't know how relevant any of this is to you guys, but
I think it's really inspiring in terms of just about being fearless, really. You know, that you making those zines and putting them into the comic shop gave you the confidence to knock on the doors of these studios. Just
going out there and doing it, you know, because none of this was anything I'd ever done at college, really. Well, I mean, I did a bit of, you know, cinematography, which was filming and stuff, but
And then 3D and gaming. So you got into...
yeah. So I worked in 2D animation for a long time, including working on. In fact, I've got some. No, I haven't. Anyway, I worked on things like Steven Spielberg had a big studio in London which was on the back of Roger Rabbit. Roger Rabbit was such a huge success, and it had been made in London, which no one even realizes now, because Disney tried to keep that quiet. And it was because it was directed by Richard Williams, who wanted to stay in London. And then so they set up, Steven Spielberg set up a studio using lots of the same people, and we did American Tail 2, which is probably the most famous one. And then they did We're Back and a dinosaur story. And then they did one called Balto, which was actually really good. If you watch Balto now, it still stands up. And then I was freelance as a 2D animator. And you see, at those times when there was these big films being made, there was kind of jobs for everyone. But when the big film companies went away, because they took Amblimation, as it was called, and they went off, they took it to America, and they started DreamWorks with those people. So that became DreamWorks. But unfortunately, I'd left by then. Well, not unfortunately, but you know, I'm not sure if I'd want to be in LA. But anyway, but then because all those big films had been made in London, and then they all went away. So then there was a overspill. There was too many people for too few jobs. So it's quite difficult. So, but then video games started to be a thing, and I was always really interested in video games. And I had a little computer when I was a teenager that I liked fiddling around with, and I liked playing games on it. And you had to load them up from cassette in these prehistoric days. You bought a little audio cassette, it was, and you played that through a tape recorder through a jack plug into the computer, and it made this horrible noise like a sort of alien being strangled or something, and then as if by magic the game appeared on your little computer. And so anyway, I'd always been into games, and then the games industry was starting up, and they were looking for animators, so I went into that. And then that's when I learned. And then 3D, it was still 2D at that time. It was making games for like the Super Nintendo system and the Mega Drive, which were like the original Sonic the Hedgehog and things like that, were 2D games. But then 3D came in, and so I learned 3D. Yeah.
So your approach to learning throughout your career, you've had to kind of keep abreast of things because of the demand of...
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. You know, like a lot of people who are perhaps more at the high end of 2D, you know, they got jobs easily at that time. But then what happened was 2D basically completely died away. And you either had to train into computers or do something else.
But it was it was when you were working, I don't know if it was the same studio, but the opportunity came to you for starting to write cutscenes because... Yes,
that's it. That's exactly what happened.
To be there.
Yeah. All the way through this time, it's important to say, I think, that as well as doing these jobs for other people on these big projects, I was still obsessively making my own films, little short films, as the photo man, like you were talking about, and other little, and I'd write scripts which were films I intended to make. But of course, it's very expensive to make a film, and I never quite made most of them. But anyway, just the fact of me keeping on writing scripts and sending them off and stuff, trying to get the money and all that. And you know, and it's like they say, the more you do something, the better you get, isn't it? It's just years and years of doing it, really. So I got pretty good at it. And then when I was working for a games company, they were, you know, they had to make the little cutscenes that tell the story in the game. And somebody was saying, oh, well, Cav makes films, like, and writes scripts, you know. And they said, oh, do you? Okay, well, you know, we'll give you a go then. It's cheaper than hiring someone, because it was quite hard to hire writers, because writing for games is a slightly different thing from writing other scripts. Anyway, so then I got into the writing the cut scenes and directing the cut scenes and stuff, and that was quite good. Yeah. And then around that time, do you want me to just carry on? Or?
Yeah, no, carry on.
Yeah, and then I made so I made the Photo Man that Mike did some brilliant little sequences for, and then I did this other film called Daddy, which I did with Joe, who Mike knows well as well. He's an illustrator and an animator, and he sort of designed it because he's really good at that sort of thing. And I wrote and directed it and animated it, and that ended up winning, got commissioned by Channel 4, and then won an award. And then I got, the award was £10,000, which was a bursary to write the short film into a feature film, which would then be made by Film 4. It's from Film 4. And so that was absolutely fantastic. And so I got paid to write this feature-length script, and then it went through various stages at Film 4. They liked it and they carried it forward. But then at a certain point, Film 4 was this huge film studio actually in London, and they made like 50 films every year or more. And then but suddenly the plug was pulled and they shrunk right down to just making 5 films a year. And so mine got lost, cancelled, which was pretty frustrating. But
gonna ask you a question, if I may. You when we had a chat before the session today, there were a couple of things that you said which I think are really worth imparting to the group. And one of the things that you touched upon was this idea of the currency of ideas and the kind of realization that you had as a consequence of learning tech, I think.
Yeah. Yes, I can't really remember what I said, but,
and we're talking about the importance of the quality of the idea.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
yes.
Yes. I guess what I was saying was that.
Sorry to put
that you know, anything that's any good, and why people become successful and why people become, successful artistically and, financially and everything else is really always down to ideas. So it's, if you can have good ideas, that can generate everything. That can generate work and, in lots of different areas, because the idea is the core of all of these different sort of disciplines. So if you're good at having ideas, you can go into a different field, a slightly different field if you need to, like I've needed to over the years, and then you can still, be successful in that field. Not so much because you learn the craftsmanship of the computer program or the drawings or anything like that, but obviously that is important. But I think, I know that anything, really ideas are key. They're the most important thing. And so when people, and when I was younger, and I didn't really go to art school. I did more of a technical sort of thing, photography and cinematography and stuff like that. But when people talk to me about art school, and they would sort of complain about like, oh, the teachers here, they aren't that good. Like, they're not really up with all the latest stuff and things like that. And but what I soon realized is when they showed me what they had learned and what's going on at the art school and things like that, I realized that they're not teaching them any of that. That's not what it's for. What it's for is to teach you about ideas and and what a good idea is, and there's such a thing as quality in ideas. It's not just subjective. There's a bad idea is a kind of obvious, corny, first thing that pops into your head kind of thing, and then you have to reject that, and then you have to go through loads of iterations of an idea and refine an idea and feed other ideas into that idea until eventually you hone something that's actually original and exciting, and it makes you excited, and when other people see it they go, that's a great idea, that's a really good idea, and they're excited. And I think that's what I was talking about there.
Absolutely. You've shown incredible agility, across your career, and you've had to kind of put on lots of hats to kind of deliver on all sorts of areas. So you recently, I still can't believe this, you got paid to do the Unreal Fellowship.
No,
I had to pinch myself and think, how do I get onto that gig?
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about that and kind of what that has now meant in terms of your projects that you're doing now.
Well, in the last 15 years or so, I've been mainly working in children's television, because in animation, most animation is for kids, and so you end up working on stuff for kids, whether it's for the cinema or for television. And I've ended up working in television, and I'm often quite, at the senior end, like dealing with the ideas, like director, or I've been storyboard director, where the kind of what I was doing there was I was getting the scripts and then breaking that down into all the shots, and then doing little thumbnail drawings of each shot, and then handing that out to a storyboard artist as a guide. But I had to plan it, because it was a show that is called Flugels, by the way. It's on Netflix, and it was CG characters in a real world, so that has to be planned very carefully. And I would be based in the suburban house where this was shot, and I'd get the script, and I'd have to look around the house and work out how these shots, how they would film the back plates where these characters would then be, composited into. And so I would take loads of photos on my iPhone, it was all filmed from the characters were that big. It was all filmed from their point of view, really. So the cameras are really low. So I'd work out all the shots on my camera and then send those to the storyboard guys, so then when we had the storyboard, it made sense relating to the actual environment, and they could film it, without any kind of having to interpret it and change it. And so it was just there clearly, okay, that's the shot in that room and that place, looking at that, so I've been working in kids TV, and then all through that, of course, because I've always had this thing of trying to come up with my own stuff, and so I sort of started trying to develop ideas for kids TV, because that was now my area of expertise, having worked in it on lots of series over an amount of time. And I knew what things were really good, that excited me and excited my kids. I knew what my kids watched on TV and excited them, which is essentially Cartoon Network, Amazing World of Gumball, those kind of shows. What's another one? I can't remember. Anyway, those Cartoon Network shows. Regular Show, that was a really good one, and Adventure Time, of course. Those sort of things. I knew my kids watched them, and they were like, "Wow, these are so cool." And I wanted to try and do. I was inspired by those, and so I started working on my own idea for a kids show, and that's a long process of getting the idea. And because I had connections, I could sort of go in and try and arrange meetings with all the big wigs and try and show them my idea and things like that. And I went through that process for a long time, and then eventually I started to make some progress with it, and I got funding from the BFI, and I got ITV involved, and now I've got Aardman involved as partners in this, and what we're doing is we're trying to raise because you have to put a patchwork of funding together from loads of different sources. You have to sell it to America, to Australia, to Europe, in order to get all the money together that it takes to make a show like that, because they, you know, they cost a lot of money to make. And yeah, so I was doing that, and one of my ideas was to do it in something like Unreal Engine, you know, or Unity, but I didn't really know which one. I didn't know a massive amount about them, so I had meetings with Unity, and I started talking to Unreal Engine people, and I found out about the mega grants, which I don't know if you know about those, but they're pretty incredible, where they just give people loads of, well, not loads of money, but they give people a substantial chunk of money if you've got a good project. Yeah,
a good incentive.
Yeah, if you come up with a good project to do in because what they want to do is they're trying to take over the world and get everyone to use Unreal Engine, but specifically people in film and TV, because already everyone in games uses it, apart from the ones that are using Unity, and so now they want everyone in film and TV. So if you've got a good project and you say, like, we might use Unreal Engine for this, and you know, and you can show that, and again, it's the idea. You can you're confident of that idea. You've developed it. It's good. It's original. It's exciting. It ticks all the boxes that people might want from kids' TV, and you can talk about it passionately. You know, you can go in front of people and you can pitch that idea and tell the story of that idea to them. You know, in a way that excites you. If it doesn't excite you, it's not going to excite them. And so I was able to do that by then. And so then what are they called? The Epic Games, who make Unreal Engine, they were quite interested in it, but I didn't really have anything. You have to sort of show something that you've done with Unreal Engine in order to get the mega grant. And I didn't really have anything like that because I hadn't actually done anything with it. So, but they said, okay, listen, what we'll do is we've got this thing called Unreal Engine Fellowship. And I'm talking about now, this isn't, I've got right up to the present now. This is like 6 months ago. So we've got this thing called Unreal Engine Fellowship, and we invite people to apply. We don't invite, well, people apply, whether we invite them or not. And anyone can apply, and as they can for the mega grant. And then it's mainly for people who've already got a kind of track record, usually in film and TV, because those are the people that they're trying to teach it. And then what they do is, for 6 weeks solid, you go full time on this course, and they pay you $10,000. And so that was amazing. So I was on this, and it's live from California. So it's California time. So it basically goes, in the UK, it goes from 4 o'clock till 1 in the morning, or it goes on later because it overruns and people have these kind of big chats at the end and things like this. and you know, and talk about their ideas and talk about their problems, and I mean, their problems in Unreal Engine, not their mental health.
Then it spills out to Friday night in the pub.
Yeah, so that did become a bit Friday night in the pub-ish, but people were all from all over the world, and you could hear the sound of people opening tins. But anyway, so that's what Mike's talking about, the Unreal Engine Fellowship, and as I say, they do generally accept people on it that have got a bit of a track record, but I don't think it needs to be like you have to have worked on lots of famous films or something. If you can show them lots of work you've done in Unreal Engine, they go, wow, that's good, then you've got a good chance of getting on that. And they're kind of agnostic, aren't they? They just say, yeah, if just show some interest, show some creativity, and come along. Yeah. And what was interesting, what you were saying about was, we touched upon it briefly last week, you know, the Unreal Engine, it's a game engine, and things very quickly fall into a sci-fi territory. And you being somebody that kind of creates the rub, you're not interested in that first idea. People obviously all went down that sci-fi rabbit hole. Yes, exactly. And you went a bit film noir, and you know. Yes, I tried to do more of a kind of almost like the opposite in a way. I tried to do like a sort of art house, sort of slow moving kind of, well, it's not really a character piece. There's just one character in it, and the character doesn't actually act. It's just a voiceover. I mean, act in the sense of dialogue, because that was the other thing that I thought I'm going to avoid, because I could see all these other films that have been made where people had tried to do dialogue and close-up face acting, and it's very difficult. I mean, you see some good stuff now, quite, pretty good, but like when you watch things like Love, Death and Robots on Netflix, there's stuff in there where they've got sort of realistic humans, and they're, it's working pretty well now. It doesn't look as weird as it used to look. But it's very, exactly, uncanny valley, but it's very difficult to do that well, and I realized that, in 6 weeks, it seemed like, that would be too ambitious, really. So anyway, I worked out,
and it's a steep learning curve, wasn't it? It's like
yeah. So I thought voiceover and then, so it's an internal monologue, the dialogue of the main character, who's a teenage girl, and the reason she's a teenage girl is because because my daughter is really good at acting, and so I thought, okay, well, there's a free voice right there. And I always like things with voices of children for some reason. There's something compelling, absorbing, emotional, sort of, all those things. And so some of my other most successful short films I made were about children, starring children. And anyway, so I carried on that same route. And
that's fantastic. Really amazing. It's exciting now because you've got a project underway, obviously that's gaining traction.
Yes.
And you're obviously involved in writing and directing that. So those two skills that were your passions early on.
That is great, because for a long time, I think another thing, how it works, if you carry on doing your own work and you carry on trying to have ideas, and just persist with that, don't give up. Another thing that happens is, because as I described, when I started out, I was working on, I was lucky enough to get through the door in animation, so I was working on animated films, but they weren't my films. I was just, you look at the credits, and Roger Rabbit, you literally wait 20 minutes for my name right at the bottom. So you don't really have authorship of the idea or the film or anything. You're just a part of a big team, which is great. But, I always wanted to do my own ideas, really. So I persisted over the years, and I kept having ideas and write, and I'd have a notebook of ideas and also little sketches and things. And also then I'd write scripts, because I'd done cutscenes for games. I then got hired to write scripts for other games, just as a script writer. So that was good. And then, so anyway, my point is that at one point, what I did for my own passion, right, was over here, and I was just doing it in my spare time, and no one was particularly taking any notice. And then what I did for my job was over here. And then slowly they merged over time. Sometimes they would slightly overlap, and then eventually they became the same thing. I do. I mean, I'm not saying everything I do now is my own thing. It isn't. I get hired as an animator to work on all sorts of different things, and that's how I pay my mortgage. But in terms of like my own project now has got a very good chance, I think, of happening. And so that's all these things coming together,
Super exciting. Are you working under a project code name for that?
Well,
you don't have to make one up now. Just, I don't want you to.
Yeah, I mean, no, I can tell you the name. It's called Badger and Bosun's Adventures in Reality.
Hey, awesome. There we go. Look forward to it. Well, Gav, thank you so, so much. Any questions from our attendees today? We're not, it's 3 o'clock, we're flagging already, but really,
I know
really,
that you might not think a lot of that applies to, you know, what your path that you see, but I suppose the point I'm trying to make, and Michael's pushing me towards, is that thing of just keeping on, having your own ideas and doing your own work and having a notebook and all that sort of stuff. And sometimes you just think, oh, no one's interested in this shit. What am I doing? and you get a bit despondent, you know, and sometimes you can't, you're not coming up with good ideas, and you think, oh God, that's rubbish. But you just have to keep going with it, you know, and then you do, you know, I think if you persist, and also you're not scared to show people, and you know, you eventually, you're really glad that you did that for all those years, because it feeds into you, even if people don't seize one of your ideas and go, right, yes, let's do that, here's loads of money. Even if that doesn't happen, it feeds into your other work all the time, because you're using your brain in a way that isn't just what you're told to do at work. You're using it, you know, you're opening your mind to all kinds of other things, and you're getting used to constantly thinking outside the box, I suppose. I hate that expression, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, but it's true. And also the tools are now available for you to kind of articulate those ideas very, very quickly.
Yes, they are, exactly. And you can pick up Unreal Engine, and it is amazing. Like, I remember when I first picked up a 3D package, and I thought, God, this is incredible. This is like a little film studio that I'm controlling the whole thing. There's the cameras, the sets, you can make objects, you can make props, the lighting, you know, you get characters in, you can just make a film on your own like that. And of course that is true, but it's quite difficult to make a character, to rig it, to make it act in a, you know, interesting way, in a convincing way, and then light it all brilliantly, and, you know, make all the models. That's why they have a team, really. But I mean, of course, that is possible if you keep the idea simple. But anyway, when I saw Unreal Engine, I had that again, because Unreal Engine makes that, you don't have to, you know, so much of that is there on the marketplace and stuff. You can pull in trees and houses and forests and towns and sky and weather and any object you can think of, and the what are they called? The humans,
humans. Yeah.
Yes, them. You can pull them in. I mean, it is difficult. It's not as easy as, you know, it's not quite as easy as The Sims. Like, my daughter plays The Sims, and that's similar. She's just dragging characters and chairs, and, you know, but so it's not quite simple as that. But, you know, especially if you used another 3D package, then you can, you know, there's a learning curve, but you can start to do that, and you can make really interesting stuff just on your own. It's all there. It's like this amazing toolbox, you know.
Brilliant. Yeah. And next week we're going to open that toolbox, and that's kind of going to be our first little project where we're going to create a prototype, basically. So if I just share my screen, I don't know if I've still got that open. Let me have a look. Yeah, so if you recall, last week in our first presentation, we looked at this. This is the Coca-Cola Beatbox, which is an installation that was at the 2012 Olympics. And I was looking at this the other day and thinking, all right, well, actually, if we distill this down, this is a single actor. This is one pane that has some behaviors that is then procedurally generated, potentially, into a cluster. And that cluster can have a relationship with us as a player. And depending on our proximity as a player to each of these individual actors, a different interaction will happen, and it will play a different tune. It might light up a different intensity. And we can build that next week. That's the plan. So, you know, it's kind of taking an idea. We're just using this one for the sake of ease. And where is it gone? We're just going to deal with the kind of interaction and really kind of show the scale of it. So this was Asif Khan who designed that piece. How do I stop sharing? So that's kind of the idea. I've got 3 or 4 rainy days here in Portugal because the weather has turned, and I'm going to just sort of knuckle down and create that. So next week we'll do that as an Unreal Engine. I think I did say download 4.27. I'm now thinking, should we do it in 5? Partly because there has been interface changes, and that's the way it's going to go forward. So I will send you a message if I want you to download 5 and install that before. We probably will, because otherwise it's like, why are we looking at this if this is where it's going?
Is 5 a lot different then?
Not at all. It's purely a skin, really, and a few tabs have moved around. Fundamentally, under the hood, it's exactly the same. It's just 4.27 is just ugly, and 5 is much neater. You know, it's slick. It's been considered a lot more. You can have a much bigger viewport because you can hide a lot of the tabs. You know, it's so overwhelming, the kind of nested windows within drop downs that 4.27 has. So it's just been sprung clean a bit.
Yeah.
It's much
Yeah,
nicer.
it's not. Yeah, it is quite an ugly piece of software, isn't it?
It's horrendous. So, but I'll send a message to you all, guys. Cav, thank you for your time today. Really appreciate it. And I will speak to you very soon, no doubt.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Nice to meet you, everyone. Thanks. Okay,
Cheerio.
bye.
Thanks, Cav. I am waving again. Sorry.
Okay, waving.
Man, this is so infuriating. We'll try again. Start video. No, cannot start video.
I'll look at the chat before I go.
Yeah, go for it. Okay, guys. So
Thank you, everyone. Thank you. I'm glad it was interesting.
good luck with it all moving forward. It's really exciting.
Thank you. Fab Labs. I'm going to check that out.
Yes, yeah. So that's kind of additive manufacturing, basically. You can go and use all their equipment. They have open days where you can say, all right, well, I want to, you know, in your case, you might have a character design that you want to 3D print or all sorts.
Okay. Oh, you can do that, can you?
All that sort of stuff, yeah. So for the rest of today, I thank you again. You know, it's Friday afternoon. I know it's not the best time of the week.
Remember what I told you? Friday night pub. Go on.
Go on.
What are you doing sitting there?
Ship off.
Actually, it is a bit early, isn't it?
So, yeah, I'd
Okay.
encourage you to kind of continue with that blended tutorial for now. If you've not done, has anyone completed the first one? I know you've had a work check week, and I know it's not that straightforward. Basically, when you've done the first one, I would encourage you to try and do the second one, which is called the Anvil playlist. It's really good. It's much more complicated. It's much more about texturing, actually, which is really important to kind of get your head around, and UV maps. And it's a world of pain, but it's not going to be dependent on next week's session, but it's just good to kind of get it out of the way. Definitely. Any questions, anybody? Oh, thank you again for your time. I'm really sorry about earlier, about having to watch that recording instead of, but to be honest, I would have said exactly the same thing. Take care. And
Okay, bye.
I tell you what, can you reach out to me on Telegram, because of this ridiculous email situation? Can you just either email me at mikelenstips@gmail.com, so I've got your email address, and then just reach out to me on Telegram so that I can add you into a group. That would be really helpful, because Telegram's not that great either. I don't think, personally, but everything seems to be channeled through there. Excellent. Good luck, guys, and I will see you next week.
Cheers, guys.
Bye.
See you later.
See you later.
Cheers.
Bye, Ruby. Bye, Lee. Bye, Oscar. Thanks, Gav. Please go. Oh, how do I?